They said, these guys might not win, but we have an obligation as newspapers to point out that these are the most qualified guys that are running. And not only qualification is one thing, but they're talking about all the issues as they need to be talked about. An honest debate and discussion on all of the issues that face this great country. Have you thought about it come election day? If Hillary is elected, there is going to be a constant drumbeat of impeachment from day one. It's going to extend for the 4 years that she's in office. And if Donald Trump is elected, he's going to be in court over something. As President of the United States, he's going to be in court.
The lesser of two evils is still evil.
There's three. A wasted vote is voting for someone you don't believe in. Vote for who you believe in. That's how you change things. And there is an opportunity here to change things, and there is an opportunity to win. There is an opportunity to win. Let's go out of here. If nothing else happens tonight, let's walk out of here dancing, all right? And I mean dancing. You know, we're the ones that fling in the rock, right? David, Goliath, you know, boom. Every one of you, every one of us. And it's not too late either to affect others. This has the big opportunity for change. We weren't in the presidential debates. I hope if nothing else comes out of this election is that the Presidential Debates Commission wears no clothes. Democrats, Republicans, Bill Weld and myself, Libertarian candidates for president, we are the only third party on the ballot in all 50 states. Back to the editorials. Shouldn't two former Republican governors that served in heavily Democrat states that got reelected by a bigger margin the second time than the first time, don't these guys qualify to be in the presidential debates on top of being on the ballot in all 50 states? Yeah, they do. This is the newspapers talking now. The newspapers saying they are talking about issues that if candidates will understand, candidates will listen to what they're saying, candidates 10 years from now are going to be talking about the agenda that they're talking about today because it is the agenda of America. And there are three scenarios in this election. Trump gets elected, Clinton gets elected. Does anybody think that the polarity in Congress is going to get any better? No way. No way. It's going to get worse than ever. Their agenda is to kill one another. That's their entire agenda. So, third choice. Johnson Weld, fiscally conservative, socially inclusive, skeptical when it comes to our military interventions, when it comes to regime change, and free market. The opposite of crony capitalism. Crony capitalism is when government picks winners and losers. I agree 100% with Donald Trump and his #1 issue in this campaign. I agree with Hillary Clinton 100% on her #1 issue in this campaign. Don't vote for Trump and don't vote for Clinton. Keep government out of my pocketbook and out of my bedroom. If I may share with you some things that you don't know about me. I grew up in the Dakotas. I grew up hunting. Church was something that was a centerpiece of our lives. Boy Scouts, Cub Scouts, hunting. I moved to Albuquerque, New Mexico when I was 13, and I came to love the outdoors. Not that I didn't love the outdoors, but in New Mexico, skiing, mountain climbing, things that I really enjoyed. The things that I've learned in life is always tell the truth. If you tell the truth, you don't have to remember anything. And if you tell the truth, you'll admit mistakes, and we all make mistakes. It's our ability with how we deal with mistakes that ultimately determines success. Every single day we are faced with diversity. Every single day there's a setback. Do you lay on the couch? Do you crawl up in a ball, declare yourself a victim? Or do you get up the next day with a smile on your face and recognize that that's part of the process? I'm the guy, and I think all of us recognize it. Get up tomorrow with a smile on your face, because that's the way that you need to deal with it. I have always been on time to a fault. And all time does is it just shows respect for the person that you have arranged to meet. I lived also by the golden rule. Do unto others as you would have others do unto you. Since I've been 17 years old, I've paid for everything that I've had in my life. I started a one-man handyman business in college in Albuquerque and actually grew that business to employ over 1,000 people. One of the absolute magic formulas to success is sharing in the profits. Sharing in the profits grows the pie to a much bigger extent than it would have grown had you not shared the profits. And then hiring and firing. It's really, really easy to hire people. But there's nothing more difficult than firing people. Nothing. But if you can't fire people, and it isn't necessarily their fault, it may be my fault, but if you can't fire people, things become dysfunctional. And that's really the difference between the public sector and the private sector. In the private sector, you have to fire or you're going to end up bankrupt. In the public sector, we elect a lot of officials, most of them, who have never hired and fired. And so they find it extremely easy to hire. They find it impossible to fire because it's so difficult, and that becomes a dysfunctionality. They also hire a bunch of people who have never hired and fired, and so it really compounds itself. That's the big differences. For me, money has always represented freedom and not things. With a certain amount of money, you can do what you want to do when you want to do it. It really doesn't take all that much money. But for me, like I say, freedom always about money. And for me, freedom is athletics, being able to do the things I want to do, mountain climb. Skiing is my passion. If I'm not elected President of the United States, I plan to ride the Divide this summer, which is a 3,000-mile mountain bike race across the Great Divide. Now, it's easy to say that I'm going to do that because I'm not going to actually have to embark on it, because come Tuesday... And I have some advice for all of you, all right? Whatever it is that you do in your life, apply it entrepreneurially. There will never be a greater reward than creating your own job or creating jobs for others. Another thing is to live debt-free. I don't owe anybody any money. I have never taken one penny from politics. I think it puts me in a unique position that the others are not in. And that unique position is doing the right thing as opposed to whatever it takes to get reelected. I became governor of New Mexico, and I'd never run for political office before. I went and I introduced myself to the Republican Party 2 weeks before I announced my candidacy in New Mexico. What they said was, hey, we like you, we like what you've got to say, we think you're terrific, but you will never be able to win. You can't come from completely outside of politics and get elected governor in a state that's 2-to-1 Democrat. It's just not going to happen. Well, how did it happen? I actually paid for my own campaign. That's how it happened. So I wasn't in debt to anybody. I wasn't beholden to anybody. And I think people saw that for what it was. And that was somebody who could make for good government. And I will tell you, good government is easy. It's not hard. It's easy. Honesty, integrity. As governor of New Mexico, I was more outspoken than any governor in the country regarding school choice. Really believing that we should leave schools up to the states, get the federal government out of education. When you think of the Khan Academy, how many are familiar with the Khan Academy? Free education, kindergarten through a doctoral degree in any subject, and it's free. That's the model of the future. The model of the future is not bricks and mortar. And if you actually brought about school choice, where we could have choices when it comes to education, that's the model that I think will succeed. I was not a wallflower as governor of New Mexico, nor was Bill Weld. Bill Weld, in his first day in office, in a state that was 4-to-1 Democrat, furloughed 8,000 state employees and didn't even receive a postcard that was the wrong thing to do. Now, you'd think in a state that was 4-to-1 Democrat, him being a Republican, that he would have gotten ridden out on a rail. He got reelected by a 70% margin, the highest margin in the history of Massachusetts. I was also more outspoken than any governor in the country regarding the war on drugs. I think the fact that we have 2.3 million people behind bars in this country has its basis in the war on drugs, and that we need to bring an end to the war on drugs. I'm running for president because I think I could make a difference. I think I could make a really big difference. And we are on the ballot in all 50 states. We don't live in a democracy. We democratically elect our representative, but we live in a republic. And a republic is governed by laws. That's the difference. And the law is the Constitution of the United States. And the Constitution of the United States is a document that limits the power and scope of government. That is the Constitution of the United States. The first 10 amendments to the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, guarantees the rights of the minority against the will of the majority. Democracies fail because people vote themselves a raise, and you can't sustain that, and that's what happens. Democracies fail because people end up in prison because of the will of the majority as opposed to the rights of the minority. And at the heart of that, I think the drug war is a terrific example. I don't think it's constitutional to have a $20 trillion debt. And when Bill Weld and I are pledging to submit a balanced budget to Congress in the first 100 days, why is a balanced budget important? It's important for young people. Young people are getting screwed. I'm going to get my health care. I'm going to get my retirement, but you as a young person, you got to pay for it. And oh, by the way, it's not going to be around by the time you need to collect it. And then President Obama's affordable health care plan. Dependent on young, healthy people paying for older, not so healthy people. And then young people being called on to go and fight in these civil wars to which there is no end. The military signed up to defend us against attack. And we should have an invincible national defense. But let's stop with these military interventions that have the unintended consequence of making things worse, not better. And among active military personnel polled, I am the overwhelming choice to be the next president of the United States. And to all of those veterans that are out there, to all of the active servicemen and women that are out here right now, gratitude on all of our parts for all of the service that you've committed to. But that service does not include putting you in harm's way over objectives that are anything but clear. Talking about a balanced budget. You can't balance the budget unless you're going to talk about the reform to Medicaid, Medicare, and Social Security. Can't do it. Back to the newspapers. Look, these are the guys, Johnson and Weld, that are talking about the fact that there has to be a debate and a discussion on Medicare and Medicaid and Social Security if all these programs are going to survive into the future, and neither Trump nor Clinton are saying anything about the entitlements. Actually, Hillary wants to increase the entitlements when they are not sustainable. Not sustainable. And then military spending. We will pledge, Bill Weld and myself, an invincible national defense, but the Pentagon itself in the mid-90s with the Brack Commission said that we could eliminate 25% more U.S. bases than were eliminated, but there has not been the political will to do that. That was the Pentagon itself that said that. The model of the future is Uber everything. That's the model of the future. It's Uber doctor, it's Uber lawyer, it's Uber accountant, it's Uber plumber, electrician. It's eliminating the middleman. It's allowing for you and I as providers of goods and services to supply those goods and services to an end user who doesn't pay for a middleman either. So the end user ends up paying less, you as the provider end up making more. I think we've just begun to see the tip of the sharing economy. And it's exciting. And by the way, we are all on par with everybody else on the planet right now because of the internet. We all have equality. There isn't anything that any of us can't be relative to the entire planet because of the internet. How can there be more exciting times than right now? And I will tell you, and you're starting to see it, legislation that is going to pick winners and losers in the internet as opposed to keeping it open for equal opportunity. Airbnb. Airbnb. I was talking to a young woman in Baltimore. She got her doctorate, 26 years old, doctorate in science. She says, I have these horrendous student debts, but I figured out a way to pay back the student debts, Airbnb. On a pathway to pay back all my student debts, and the city of Baltimore stepped in and banned Airbnb. The government, no, you're seeing it. You're seeing it played out everywhere, that competition to the status quo gets thwarted. And competition is what America is all about. America is all about equal opportunity. Making it easy to be self-employed. Making it easy to be an entrepreneur as opposed to making difficult. And certainty. You know, in the 2012 election, Rick Perry was beating his chest over the fact that he had created more jobs in Texas than anyone else running for president. Well, they did an analysis, and actually it was Gary Johnson. And when asked, I gave the same response that I gave when I was governor. I did not create one single job when I was governor of New Mexico. Government doesn't create jobs, the private sector does. But government can create equal opportunity. Government can give opportunity to everybody. I may have vetoed more bills than the other 49 governors in the country combined. I vetoed a lot of legislation that was crony capitalism, that gave favoritism to one group as opposed to favoritism to all of us. And then stood up to the fact that, gosh, spending, you've got to spend within your limits. A lot of what was being proposed was, you could say, laudable. A lot of what was being proposed were addressing problems that the state has, but it was political money being thrown at a problem. It wasn't systemic money. And I stood up to that. You would think, if my having vetoed that much legislation in a state that was 2-to-1 Democrat, that I would have gotten ridden out on a rail also. But I got reelected by a bigger margin the second time than the first time. I do believe that free markets are all about more U.S. jobs, not less U.S. jobs.
Yeah.
Crony capitalism, and Hillary has taken this to a new art form. Government's for sale, and we're seeing it with WikiLeaks. We're seeing the fact that she says one thing to Wall Street and another thing to Main Street. I say the same thing to anybody, any group, anytime, anywhere. It's the same things that I say all the time, over and over and over again. Immigration. We are a country of immigrants. We should embrace immigration. We should make it as easy as possible for somebody that wants to come into this country and work to be able to get a work visa. Just make it simple. Background check, Social Security card, the taxes get paid. Don't put the government in charge of quotas. That's the reason that we have 11 million undocumented workers in this country right now. You can't get a work visa, and you would if you could. You would get a work visa if the line was moving. Let's not build a wall across the border to Mexico. Let's build bridges across the border to Mexico. If there's any country that we should develop strong ties with diplomatically and economically, it's Mexico, as opposed to building a wall. Is there a more difficult choice in anyone's life other than abortion? I don't think so. When I say anyone's life, it would be the woman involved that would be having to make that difficult choice. But should it be anyone making that choice other than the woman involved? I don't think so. Marriage equality, believing that it is constitutionally guaranteed. Back to the military. Let us turn the satellites away from you and I as U.S. citizens. Based on what I know about Edward Snowden, and what I know about Edward Snowden is that he had this massive amount of information that he gave over to the major media to release, because he said he did not have the resources, nor could he take the responsibility of releasing any of this information because it might put many people in harm's way. So based on what I know, which is that no one has come under harm's way, I think that Edward Snowden is a hero and he should be pardoned. I believe in term limits. I think term limits would be a silver bullet. Politicians that would do the right thing as opposed to whatever it takes to get reelected. I do not believe we would have a $20 trillion debt if term limits were in effect. Let me say that all lives matter, but let me say that black lives matter. And black lives matter because blacks are being discriminated against in a really big way. Getting shot at the rate of 6 times that if you're white. When it comes to drugs, if you are of color and you are arrested on a drug-related crime, there's a 4 times more likelihood that you will end up behind bars than if you're white. So this is happening. But I will also say, I don't think life in this country has ever been better. Ever. I think that we get along with each other better, we communicate with each other better than ever, our kids are smarter than ever, and the number one law enforcement tool that we have right now are our smartphones in our pockets. So I think that we do have an issue with discrimination, but I think we're going to come to grips with this faster, better, more accurately. As President of the United States, the Department of Justice can play a big role in determining what are the common threads of least discrimination, least violence, what are the common threads, most discrimination, most violence. This is an issue that we have, but like I say, I think that we will deal with these issues. Regarding the military also, that if we're attacked, we should attack back. So a great example, in my opinion, is Afghanistan. We were attacked by Al-Qaeda. We were attacked by Osama bin Laden. When we went into Afghanistan in 2001, I fully supported that. After we were in Afghanistan for 7 months, we wiped out Al-Qaeda. We should have gotten out of Afghanistan after 7 months. Here we are 15 years later. Let's get out of Afghanistan. And for all of the problems that we will have, for all of the hardship that will be created getting out of Afghanistan tomorrow, those same identical issues will exist 1 year, 10 years, 20 years, or for some, I guess, we're going to be there for eternity. Let's get out of Afghanistan. Iraq, on the other hand, Iraq was and is all about regime change. When I left office in 2003, I just left office, I was asked about, we were girding to attack Iraq, asked about attacking Iraq. My response was, look, I don't think we should do this. I think we have the military surveillance capability to see Iraq roll out any weapons of mass destruction. If they do that, we have all sorts of options to deal with that. But if we go into Iraq, we're going to find ourselves in a civil war to which there will be no end. And I'm afraid that's what's happened in Iraq. And because of the void that we created in Iraq, which, by the way, caused Turkey to not be such a good ally anymore because they didn't want us to do that to begin with, we created voids. We created voids in Iraq where Saddam's henchmen fled to Syria, to Raqqa, and arguably organized ISIS. And we support the Free Syrian Army in Syria, but the Free Syrian Army, when we armed them, and this was Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama, and it wasn't intentional, but it's what happened. When we armed them, there was all this conjecture that those arms were going to end up in the hands of the Islamists and in the hands of ISIS, and they have ended up in the hands of the Islamists and ISIS. And then we support the Kurds. The Kurds are sideways with Turkey. And before any of this started, we gave Assad resources to fight against the Islamists before any of this started. Is this where we want our men and servicewomen? Is this what we want to create in the world? I don't think so. As President of the United States, I think that you should elect somebody who can play chess and see just a few moves ahead, all right? Just a few moves ahead. And be able to untangle all of these promises that have been made. Clearly, there have been promises made on behalf of all of us, but we are paying for it with our blood and our treasure. When you tell the truth, you admit mistakes. So in a highly publicized, I'm going to change my mind while I was governor of New Mexico, I changed my mind regarding the death penalty. When I took office, I campaigned that I believed in the death penalty. Having become governor of New Mexico, I came to recognize that the death penalty is flawed public policy because the error rate on the death penalty may be as high as 4%. I don't want to put 4 innocent people to death to punish 96 that are guilty. Governor Ryan of Illinois ordered a review of everyone on death row in Illinois. 36 inmates on death row, orders a review, And because of DNA testing, over 20 of them are released because they were categorically proven to be innocent because of DNA testing. And when you realize that it costs less to lock someone up for the rest of their lives as opposed to putting them on death row because of the attorney fees involved in the appeals on death row, but then come to find out that somebody gets let off because they are innocent, that makes that service invaluable. It's priceless. So, flawed public policy. As governor of New Mexico, I had a policy that no other governor in the country had, and that was open door after 4. I saw, for 8 straight years, I saw anyone in the state of New Mexico on the 3rd Thursday of every month, starting at 4 o'clock in the afternoon until 10 o'clock in the evening on 5-minute increments, and I learned a lot about state government. I learned a lot about people. I stayed in touch because of that. As President of the United States, I'm pledging to have an open door after 4 policy as President of the United States. And I am pledging that my entire cabinet, made up of Democrats, Republicans, Libertarians, Independents, nonpartisan, non-political, I promise that my cabinet is also going to set up open door after 4 meetings with the entire country because we're going to stay in touch. You know, when the whole Flint, Michigan thing broke and the governor of Michigan said, hey, I didn't know anything about it, I take him at his word for it. He didn't know anything about it, but because of open door after 4, I had a mechanism in place. I would have known about it. I would have been dealing with it. People would have been mad, and they would have been in to see the governor. I'm pledging to be the most frugal president in your lifetimes, elected president. And to bring much-needed humility to the office. Gary Johnson's 7 principles of good government. 1 is become reality-driven. Find out what's what and base your decisions and actions on that. Number 2, always be honest and tell the truth. It's really extremely difficult to do any harm to somebody who's willing to tell the truth, regardless of the consequences. Number 3, always do what's right and fair. Find out what's what. Base your decisions and actions on that. Learn to ignore your critics. Continue to do what you know is right. Number 4, determine your goal, develop a plan to reach that goal, and then act. Don't procrastinate. Number 5, make sure everybody who ought to know what you're doing knows what you're doing. Communicate. Number 6, don't hesitate to deliver bad news. How much of the problem results from a non-acknowledgement of the problem in the first place and the cover-up that follows, as opposed to just acknowledge the problem? There's no quicker way to get to a solution than to get it out there right away. And then lastly is be willing to do whatever it takes to get your job done. If you don't have a job that you love enough to get your job done, then quit. And tomorrow, get a job that you love. There is nothing better than waking up every single day and doing what it is that you want to do with your life. That is living your life to the fullest. And here it is. It's Saturday night, and you all are here, and I cannot thank you enough.